Welcome to each of you to our CDA webinar series. Today we're presenting the CDA exam, Special Accommodations. We welcome all of you. We bring greetings from our CEO, Dr. Calvin Moore, Jr., and our Vice President of Programs, Sabina Okran-Jackson. Before we start, I want to give you some logistics. First of all, I know everybody wants to know if we will have a certificate for you, and we will have a certificate. So at the end of the presentations, we're going to put in the chat an email. You have to send us an email so you can get your certificate for this presentation. Also, the recording of the session is going to be sent to you. And we would like you to please use the feature that you have for questions and answers to write your questions, because we want you to have questions. And please don't use the chat. We're just going to use that feature for questions and answers. It is my pleasure to conduct this presentation with Raquel Andrade. Raquel?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raquel Andrade, and I am the director of the Credentialing Department, and we're happy that you're here with us today.
And I am Vilma Williams, a senior manager for the multilingual program at the council. So before we start, we're going to talk to you about what are our objectives. So we want you to learn how we have incorporated equitable practices, policies, and procedures into the national CDA credentialing process and competencies, so we can support CDA candidates with disabilities. We also would like you to learn about the requirements and the steps for CDA candidates to receive these special accommodations when they take their CDA exam in full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as ADA. So because we respect that law and we follow it, the council is committed to provide an assessment that is fair, that is standardized for all eligible candidates applying for CDA. As I mentioned before, we're in full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we're fully committed to providing reasonable accommodations to all eligible CDA candidates. So a little bit about the act, this law that protects people in America with disabilities. So in 1990, this law was passed, and this law prohibits discrimination and ensures equal opportunity for people who have disabilities for employment, state and local government services, public accommodations, commercial facilities, transportation, and in our case, for the assessment of the CDA credential. So as states in this law, a person with a disability that requires an accommodation must be otherwise qualified to apply for the CDA credential. In other words, the person applying for CDA must be able to perform the duties of the lead teacher to demonstrate competence. The council offers a process for candidates so that they can request accommodations so they can complete the CDA exam, so that they can have a rewarding experience and the opportunity to professionalize, their work. Candidates who need a special accommodation must complete the exam. To complete the exam, must request these accommodations, and they have to receive approval of those accommodations from the council before they submit their application. So let me pause here a little bit and explain a little bit more. So a candidate who works with children and would like to earn the CDA credential can do so even if they have any disabilities that require them to take, to have accommodations for the exam. Why only for the exam? Because those are the accommodations that in the field, in the area of being an early childhood teacher, you're gonna need, because it is expected that you can perform the duties of a CDA or a lead teacher, just like anybody else. But because of the disability, you will have to have accommodations to take the exam only. That is basically what it means. So, so we grant accommodations based on the law, the ADA law. For this reason, the candidates, when you ask for the accommodations, you are required to provide official medical documentation to support the request. So the accommodation requires, the request for accommodation requires official documentation that can be from a physician, can be also from your IEP from school, or any other authorized personnel. It has to be written on letterhead, official letterhead, that includes a prescription or an IEP from the school, or a medical, or a letter from the doctor. It has to list the name, the contact information, and the signature of the person who's writing the letter, the physician or the administrator. It must outline the candidate's needs and, if possible, necessary accommodations for the exam. Some examples of accommodations that Pearson VUE provides based on ADA are the following: additional time, separate room, a reader, a recorder. I want you to know that in the accommodations, in the listing, there is one that says read out loud. That means that you want to read yourself your exam out loud. But if you need somebody to read it to you, you have to choose this reader, a reader. These are some examples. There are more. And Pearson VUE has a list of qualifying comfort aids allowed at the, when you go to take your exam without request, without approval, previous approval. So there are two different things: the comfort aids and the CDA special accommodations. The CDA special accommodations require you to ask for them and also to be granted, authorized for these accommodations. The comfort aids are, are allowed without any previous approval. So there's a list of allowable comfort aids available in the Pearson VUE website, and you can download them. So on the day of the exam, the test center staff will ask to visually inspect these items during the check-in process. Some of the comfort aids that I mentioned are some examples, like IP pens, eye drops, if you have eye drops, inhaler, insulin pump, pillow, cushion, oxygen tank, cane, wheelchair. So those things are not required, you don't require to ask for special accommodations for those items, for those comfort aids. If you want to access the official list and find out what are the accommodations, what is the list of accommodations, you can go to the council website and click find a CDA in the educator's pathway, find a CDA test site right there. And then that will take you to the Pearson VUE website. And then you will have the list of CDA accommodations there. Test accommodations on the right-hand side. There you go. And there, a little bigger for you to know on the right-hand side. To access the list of allowed comfort aids, you click download the list under approved comfort aids. And then you will get a 2-page document with all the list of the comfort aids.
Phil might want to just take a
Sure.
pause here because we do have a few questions. Some
Okay.
people are asking about the recording. Yes, everyone will get a recording of the webinar. It will take about a week to get that out to you, but you will get a copy, a recorded copy of this webinar. We also have a couple questions, I think a little more specific and individualized, so I will go ahead and answer them. But if you do have more individualized questions, we would ask that you contact our customer support department directly to answer these questions, because it requires them to look up your account, potentially ask you some additional questions in order for us to answer accurately. But just in general, we have someone asking about extended time, and that in our system we have several options of extended time. and whether or not it matters what extended time you ask for. Typically, the documentation that is submitted will indicate how much extra time is usually allotted. So if you have documentation that does specify double exam time or whatever the case may be, we would go based on that. However, if you select less time than what is noted in your documentation, we will go ahead and grant you the time that you asked for if it is less time. And then there was a question about the reader recorder. The reader, as Vilma mentioned earlier, someone who will read the exam out loud to you. The recorder is someone who will also read the questions and potentially record your answers for you. So they'll read the questions, they'll read the answers. You will tell that person, I select option A, and they will click that in the system for you. So that is what is meant by a recorder, because I think there was a slight misunderstanding that it meant it was an actual recording that could be played over and over again.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, they will record your answer in the computer for you.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, if you have been out of school for years, can you and will you receive or accept paperwork from the regional center as proof of an IEP?
From the regional center.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you have been out of school for a long time and you probably don't have your IEP or you have a special question, you can contact us after because that is special request, but you do have to have some proof. Sometimes your training program can do that. You know, an authority can do that and explain to us what is your specific situation, but we need to talk because they vary. But is it possible? Yes. Any other questions? More
Oops,
questions?
sorry. That's it. That's it for right now.
Okay, for right now, but we like to answer your questions. And you know, like Raquel says, if you have very specific personal questions about your very own case, we can always help you afterwards, right? Okay, so some points of clarification when we talk about CDA exam accommodations. So we said we already know that they are solely based on disabilities and how people are protected by this law, by this act, the American with Disabilities Act, or the Act for Americans with Disabilities. We do not approve requests from candidates applying for accommodations based on English as a second language. Some people said, you know, if English is not my second language, so I need a reader or I need something, you know, so that is not basis for these accommodations. English as a second language does not correspond to the nature of the CDA accommodations request meant for the candidates with disabilities under this act. So basically, not being proficient in English is not a disability. And our policies were established to ensure that we have optimal conditions for those candidates as they prepare for final competency evaluation. So we are very flexible. Sometimes we understand we can make you know, make decisions on your case, like I said. However, certain criteria simply cannot be waived without jeopardizing the integrity of the CDA credential. So what do you do to get these accommodations? To request accommodations, you have to submit the request directly to the council. And the CDA special accommodations must be requested and approved before you can submit your application. If you're applying online, you must request the exam accommodations online. You know, it's actually when you go to the application, and Raquel is going to explain a little bit more that there is a portion of the application that is like the pre-application, where you will indicate that you need accommodations, right? And then we will know that you need that. And then we will follow a process for that. If you're applying using a paper application, then you have to submit a paper request prior to sending your paper application. Please don't mix both. You cannot use the paper to apply online or apply online and use the paper. You can't. You know, you have to choose one way or the other one. If you ask us, the best way to apply is online, faster, and more accurate, easier, and yeah, so that is for that. So we're talking about now submitting a request. How do you submit requests? And Raquel is going to talk to us about this.
Thanks, Vilma. So as Vilma mentioned, accommodation requests are sent and have to be approved by the council prior to candidates submitting their applications. Pearson VUE does have a section on their website that talks about accommodations, but again, those are approved directly by the council. And so we're going to look right now at the process of how a candidate would go about requesting accommodations if they are applying online. And so in order to request accommodations, candidates will need to create an account in our system, and they would do that by going to our website, and under the option of educator pathways, they would select your council login. So that's how they start the process of creating an account. That will redirect them to this screen that we see here, and they would have to click Don't Have an Account, click here, which will then direct them to the registration screen. And so the candidate will fill out the registration screen with all of the requested information. Something important to note here at registration, it really is important that as a CDA candidate, when you are entering your name in this screen, that you do enter your name exactly as it appears on the ID that you will take to the Pearson VUE test center. The reason is because the name that you enter at this registration point is the name that will go into your account. And when your application is approved and we send the authorization to Pearson VUE, the name that you use to create your account is the name that we send to Pearson VUE. And at the point of check-in, when you're going to take your test, if the name on the ID does not match the name that we sent over based on the account, you will not be allowed to test. And ultimately what will happen is you will have to pay an additional fee to receive a new authorization. So that's just a tip right there for registration. Make sure you're entering your name exactly as it appears on your ID. After filling out this information, click Submit, and you will have immediate access to enter into your account. It is important that you place the email info@yourcouncil.org on your safe sender list, because all of the emails that come from our system relevant to your application process will be sent from this email. And what we find is that if it's not put on the safe sender list, that emails might go to clutter or in some cases be completely blocked from the system. It's also important to note that each candidate should have their own unique individual email address when they are registering in our system. Okay, so after registration, the candidates will have immediate access to their account. And in order to start this process to request accommodations, they will need to click on the menu option that says CDA Initial Application. And then that will redirect them to the application. And so in the very first screen, this first set of questions is where the candidate will be asked, do you need accommodations? It's the last question at the bottom of this screen that we see here. And so for that question, if you are going to request accommodations, you just want to make sure that you answer yes to this question. And then click Save and Continue. And that will start you on the process of completing the accommodations section of your application. You will need to click on the link to special exam accommodations. And next slide. And here you'll just encounter the instructions and click Save and Continue to move to the next screen. And this is the screen where a candidate can request accommodations. And there is a drop-down list of all the accommodations that we provide to candidates. And you are able to select multiple accommodations from this list. Again, based on the documentation that you will upload, you should select those accommodations. And you can select multiple accommodations. You just need to make sure to hold down the control key on your keyboard to be able to select those multiple accommodations. And then you will be required to upload your official documentation by clicking the Choose File button, which will then allow you to upload your documentation. And then, of course, at the very bottom, you just have to check off the statement that you have the information or the accommodations that you're requesting are supported by the documentation that you have uploaded, and then click Save and Continue. And then finally click Submit. You have to click Submit in order to actually send your request to the council. Once you do submit, you will receive an email immediately from our system, just letting you know that you have successfully submitted your request and that the council has received it and will get back to you once it's been reviewed. Let me pause here because I do see some questions. There was a question about web browsers. Is there a recommended web browser when creating accounts? The system should work across all web browsers, but if you're asking for a suggestion, my preference is Firefox. I encounter the least amount of issues when using Firefox. And another thing to note is also to just make sure that you are using, regardless of the browser, that you're using the most up-to-date version of the browser and that you have disabled the pop-up blockers. Because those are a lot of the things that can prevent this process from going smoothly. But personally, I use Firefox.
Okay.
There's another question about what will happen if the mailing address on the ID document doesn't match the address entered in the account. Okay, that is okay. What Pearson VUE is looking for is that the ID that you take, that the picture on your ID, basically that it is a fairly current picture so that they can tell it's the same person, that the name that is included on the ID matches the name that we have sent over, and then it has to include an official signature. So the address in terms of what you present to Pearson at the time of testing, if you've moved, that does not matter. When you're scheduling, it also does not matter. However, if you have moved, it is a good idea to always keep that information up to date, particularly in our system, because in the case that you're awarded, you want to make sure that that credential is sent to the most current address, and you don't want to run into issues where you don't update your address. And if we have to send the certificate back out to you, you could incur additional fees because we do send the credential to the address listed in the account at the moment that you're awarded. And I think that was it for now in terms of questions.
Okay. Do you want me to take the paper application?
Sure, you can do that.
Okay, so Raquel has explained to you how you apply for these accommodations or how you request these accommodations online. So just in the event that there is no way that you can apply, online, and then you have decided to send an application, a paper application to the council, then you will submit a paper request form for the accommodations. And that is located on the back of your competency center's book. It's a form that you had to complete before you send the actual CDA application. So you complete this request form, and if you don't have it in the book, you can also find it as a downloadable form in the section of the library, the council library, the resources. And then you go to the forms, and then you go to request form for CDX special accommodations. Again, this is only if you're using the paper version of the application. And then you have to list also the accommodations that you need. And then you have to send it to the council via email to this email address, accommodations@cdacouncil.org. You have complete the information, same as, information that Raquel said, make sure that your name is the correct name that you're gonna use. that is also corresponds to your ID that you're gonna use when you go to take your exam. And also is the name that you want on your credential. And then you will complete this section. And you will describe what type of accommodations you need. And then you will send this form to that email. So applications that we receive with an unapproved request form will not be processed. So the paper application should not be mailed until you have the response from the council in regards to approval or denial of your request for accommodations. So the completed, and also you have to submit the paper request form along with the supporting medical documentation, as we explained before. You have to send that via email also to that email, or you can mail it. Email is much better than that. Okay, so first you send the request form. When it's approved or denied, then you complete your application and you send them together. So how do we approve, how do we review this process? Once the accommodations request has been received with the supporting medical documentation, we will review. And we will, the council will review to determine if you're eligible for approval. If additional documentation is needed, you will be contacted and given special instructions on how to submit additional documentation. And you are informed of this decision via email. Once, if you do that online, when you send your request with the supporting medical documentation and we review it, you will receive an email verifying your approval. And then the email also will tell you that you can proceed with your online application. You receive an email like this. It's in 2 languages. So once you complete the paper accommodation form and then you submit your medical documentation as required, and we receive it, you will receive an official approval letter in the signed request form. And the approval letter will instruct you to mail a copy of the approval form with a completed paper application and the $500 assessment fee. So if you apply with paper, it's $500. If you apply online, it's $425. Like that will be the signature and the date.
Okay, Vilma.
Cool.
Oh, we do have
Yes.
some additional questions.
Okay.
Let's see, we have a question regarding once you request accommodations, are you able to continue with the applications? So when you're requesting your accommodations online, once you do indicate that you need accommodations and you submit your request, you do have, your application does take a pause. You will not be able to move forward until those accommodations are approved. So it is a little bit of a waiting time. Typically, it takes a couple of weeks to review your request, but it also depends on the volume that we're receiving at the time that you submit your request. So processing time can vary, but it typically takes about 2 weeks to hear back on your request. So that's why it is important that that email info@yourcouncil.org be on your safe list, because that is how we communicate back and forth with you regarding your request. If we need more information, you're going to get an email saying, please log into your account and view the additional information that we're requesting from you. In the case that it's denied, you may get an email saying, unfortunately, your request is denied, or when it's approved, you'll get that email saying you're approved. So again, having that email on your safe sender list is critical in this process, because that's how you're going to receive all of your notifications about this process.
Thank you.
We
Any other
also
questions?
have, yes.
Okay.
This is a question, I think, going back to when I mentioned if you're awarded, someone is asking if there will be a copy of the CDA award in the account. So if you're awarded your credential, you do get an email stating that you have been awarded, and then you will immediately have access to print a temporary certificate from your account. That temporary certificate is valid for 180 days. And it's really only intended to be used during the time that you receive your hard copy in the mail. So the temporary certificate, again, is only valid for 180 days. And then when you receive your actual certificate in the mail, that is the one that will be valid for the full 3 years. And I think that's it, Vilma.
Okay, thank you. So just so everybody's clear, you apply, you request, excuse me, you request the accommodations and you have to wait. You cannot send your application, paper or online, until you have the answer from the council, the approval. And once you have your approval, then you can move on, right? So when you move on and you apply and we approve your application, you will receive a ready to schedule notice. This notice, when is provided to you after you finish the application process. When you make your payment, you receive this notice. And the notice will inform you that now we are authorizing you to schedule your exam, your CDA exam, at the Pearson VUE Testing Center. And also you can schedule your verification visit with your professional development specialist. In addition, this form also tells you that you have 6 months to complete both the exam and the verification visit, and you can complete them in any order. So at the same time, so when we send you the ready to schedule, we kind of unlock, the key, and now you're ready. You have 6 months to proceed. We tell Pearson VUE, this candidate is ready. She has 6 months, and she is going to be contacting you to program his or her exam, right? So Pearson VUE gets also your approved authorization for the exam with your approved accommodations. So they will know that you have accommodations and what accommodations you will have. And the PD specialist also gets it ready to schedule. So they know you're ready to schedule the verifications. So this is how it looks. It has both things that I mentioned, information for the exam, information for the verification visit. Okay, this is an example of how it would look. There you go. And then you to schedule your exam, once you get this notice, you will have an ID number that you have to use when you're scheduling your exam with Pearson VUE. And Pearson VUE will have, as I say, your accommodations. If you have been approved for accommodations other than extra time, you may call this number. And this is also, and you're going to get this presentation, so you're going to have this. So to schedule your exam, if you wish to schedule it over the phone. Okay, again, if you have been approved for special accommodations other than the extra time, then you call this number. So we're talking about, yes.
We do have a few more questions. There was a question about the application fee. And there are 2 different application fees. If you're applying online, the application fee is $425. If you are applying using a paper application, that fee is $500. So the distinction is more so about whether you apply online or via paper. Someone had the question that special accommodation. So if you're requesting special accommodation, your fee is $500, but it's more about that distinction. If you choose to apply on paper, it is a $500 fee. If it's online, it's $425. So regardless of if you have accommodations or not, those are the 2 different fees that we have. So candidates do not pay extra to have accommodations because again, it is under ADA. We do not charge extra, but you do have to go through this process of requesting and having them officially approved, but there is no additional cost to candidates who request accommodations because they'd have accommodations.
Okay.
Let's see, there's another question here. Let's see. Okay, so this is a good question. There's a question from someone in Alaska who is indicating that a lot of the candidates from Alaska are in rural parts of Alaska and they do not have a Pearson VUE testing center nearby. And do they qualify for some sort of exception or accommodation? They definitely do. If you are in a remote location from a Pearson VUE testing center, you can also be granted an accommodation. That is slightly different because even though we classify it as an accommodation, it's not really under ADA. It's more about not being able to get to a Pearson VUE testing center without taking leaps and bounds to get there. So we do have a process for candidates who are in remote locations to a Pearson VUE testing center. You can request a paper exam. That is also done through this feature of an accommodation. There is a specific category for a paper exam, and then you can indicate that you are remote from a Pearson VUE testing center. We will look up the zip code that's in the candidate's record to verify the distance. And in some cases where if we're not able to tell just based on the zip code lookup, we may request additional documentation or an explanation as to how far away you are. But you really do have to be quite far from a Pearson VUE test center to be granted this paper exam. But for the most part, everyone in Alaska, if they request that accommodation, they are granted that accommodation.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's a question about scholarship. So if you are granted a scholarship for the application, then of course you would, scholarship agencies are able to issue voucher numbers through our system. So if you're granted a scholarship through an agency, that agency is then responsible for issuing you a voucher code that you could then apply to your application at the very end. So you wouldn't be responsible for that application fee. And I think that's it for right now.
Alrighty, thank you so much. So moving along now, when you schedule your exam, we're gonna talk about that. So you're gonna schedule your exam once you have completed the process as we explained. You can schedule your exam with approved accommodations by calling a CDA exam accommodations line. This is the number. Okay. If you have only accommodations for extra time, you can call the main Pearson VUE customer service line, which is a different number. Again, if you have just extra time, if you have been approved just for extra time, you can call this number, the 866-507-5627. If you have different accommodations, then you call the number on the top. So when you schedule this exam with an agent, you should confirm that you have accommodations and that they have been, that they have it, that everything is fine. If you call and your approved accommodations are not confirmed, please don't schedule your exam and contact us immediately to resolve the issue. So we have a tip for you. As soon as you get your ready to schedule notice telling you now you're ready to schedule, you have 6 months, remember? We recommend that you call Pearson VUE as soon as possible to schedule your exam. Because, they may require special arrangements, which may take some time. And also the availability maybe for their appointments is different. Like you call and they may say, we don't have any openings until 30 days from now or 40 days from now, or if you call and they have openings, you still can schedule at your own, desire. If you don't need to call today and have your exam tomorrow. You can call today and schedule it for a week or 2 weeks or whenever you feel comfortable. But also, it's important to remember that they also give exams to different people, not just CDAs. Some of them give exams to SATs, electricians, plumbers, etc. So they may be busy. So it's important that you call as soon as possible. On the day of your exam, there is going to be a person that we call a proctor who will assist you in setting up everything that you need and making sure that all your approved accommodations are provided during your exam. On the day of your exam, once you complete your exam, you will be given a printout that says that you have completed your exam, and the results will be sent to the council electronically. Raquel, let's talk about the credentialing decision.
Sure. Okay. So once the candidate completes the exam and the verification visit, at that point is when the candidate will receive their credentialing decision. The council evaluates the results of both the exam and the verification visit to come up with the credentialing decision. And there are two outcomes. For the most part, the majority of candidates are awarded. In a few cases, we are not able to award the credentials, so the candidate will receive a denial letter. But the instances where this happens is very small. Our denial rate at this time period is about 5%. So the majority of candidates do get awarded. So here we just have a summary of everything we went over in this presentation today. We talked about the exam accommodations being granted based on the American with Disabilities Act. The fact that exam accommodations should be submitted and approved prior to the candidate submitting their application. That we do require official supporting documentation to be submitted with the accommodations request. And that once that request is approved, the candidate will be notified of final approval via email. And that candidates should only submit their application after receiving final approval. If the candidate's applying online, that's sort of built in that you can't move forward with the application. But if you're someone who will be submitting a paper application, you just need to remember that that form comes in first, and you need to wait to hear back and then turn around and submit your application with your approved accommodations form. And when the application is approved and submitted, the council will send an exam authorization over to Pearson VUE that does include all the pre-approved accommodations. When candidates are scheduling their exam, they do need to call the exam accommodations scheduling line, and the number is here. It's 800-466-0450. That is for candidates that have been granted accommodations other than extra time. If you've only been granted extra time, you can call the main Pearson VUE number that's included in the ready to schedule notice. And there we have the main number. So the accommodations specific number is 800-466-0450, and the main Pearson VUE number is 866-507-5627. And of course, on the day of the exam, all of the pre-approved accommodations will be provided to the candidate. It's always a good idea too that when you're calling, if you have been granted accommodations, when you're actually scheduling your exam and you're calling, it's always good to confirm with Pearson what accommodations they actually have on file for you, just to make sure that all of those accommodations have gone through. And in the case where, as Vilma mentioned, they are unable to verify all of the accommodations that you have been approved for, don't schedule, and give us a call so that we can take care of that prior to you scheduling. And then the candidate will receive the credentialing decision after completing both the exam and the verification visit.
Okay, so I will tell you about, we're almost finished. The Council Alumni Network. This is great news because the Council has a platform. It's like a social, it's like a Facebook, but it's for professionals in early childhood education, friends and people in the CDA community at any level. So this is free and you can join, and there's lots of information and opportunities to be engaged with people who are in the field of early childhood education. You can join groups in your state. You can join groups in your own setting. You will be notified about events and promotions and special events that other people will not be able to attend, but only those members. So I encourage you to join. It's free, like I said, and you will find it of great value in your work in the field of early childhood education. So this is the website, the address. So to join the council, it's called Alumni Network, but it's not just for alumni. We call it alumni because we believe everybody is alumni. Friends of the council, friends of CDA programs, CDAs, people who are involved in the field. Okay, so any more questions?
Yes, we have a few more questions. Let's see here.
Yeah, while she looks for the questions, we also encourage you to visit our website or subscribe to our newsletter council link that is received by over 100,000 people. Join us in social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those platforms, and we would love to have you join. Okay, going back to the questions.
Okay, we have a question here about retaking the exam and whether someone needs to resubmit accommodations when they're creating a new application. So if a candidate is denied the credential and it ends up that they have to reapply by submitting a new application, yes, at that point they would have to resubmit their request for accommodations. But if they're the same accommodations, then they really don't, they still need to upload the documentation and submit it officially, but there really shouldn't be an issue with granting those accommodations again, because if they were approved once, unless it's something temporary, for example, you had an eye infection the first time you applied, and so you needed accommodations for that, but since then that has resolved, potentially you wouldn't be granted the same accommodations. But for other types of requests, if the circumstances are the same, then you will most definitely be granted the same accommodations as you were granted on your first application. Someone is asking about the test results. How do you get your test results? So when you go to take your exam at Pearson VUE, once you complete your exam, when you leave the test site, you will immediately receive a printout that just confirms that you have completed the exam and that the results will be sent directly to the council. Once you have completed your exam and verification visit, you will then get your final credentialing results, which are it's basically that final outcome. Congratulations, you've been awarded the credential, or again, in some cases, unfortunately, we're unable to award the credential. But, and again, that's all done via email. So you will be receiving these updated statuses via email, but only confirming that you've completed the exam or you've completed the visit. And then an email from the council just verifying we received your results, but you will not receive the individual scores for the exam and the verification visit. So we did have a question again about being remote. Again, I think specifically to Alaska. And there was a question about being remote from a Pearson VUE testing center. And we talked a little bit about the accommodation we can make for that in terms of a paper exam. The other part of that question is, well, what happens if you're also remote from a PD specialist? There aren't any PD specialists in the area who can come and conduct the verification visits. So if you are in a situation where you're remote from Pearson VUE and you're remote from a PD specialist, that is a situation where the candidate should contact the council through our customer support department to inform them of their situation. The council will then take care of finding a PD specialist who will travel to that remote location. And the council also promises, because we promise to assess candidates wherever they may be, as long as they qualify for the CDA, in most situations, the council will cover the cost of the candidate traveling to that remote location. The PD specialist is aware that there is a special process that they have to go through to get those travel expenses approved ahead of time, but that is the council. The council will cover those expenses. So the individual programs, the candidate, they do not need to worry about that. They are not charged additional fees simply because they're in a remote location. And let's see, do we have any other questions? There's a question about how long does it take to get your final results, your credentialing results from the council. Typically, after we receive the results of both the exam and the verification visit, it should take about a week. Sometimes it does take a little bit longer. Again, it all depends on the volume and how many applications or how many results we've received at the time that we receive your results. But typically, it shouldn't take longer than a week to receive your results. And again, you're informed via email.
Okay, any more questions?
There's a question about retaking the exam. So there are two different situations there. If you're denied the credential and you choose, if you're denied the credential, you are given an option of submitting an appeal. Appeals technically are based on procedural violations. So if you feel that there was a procedural violation at the time that you went to test at Pearson VUE, you would at that time need to indicate that through an appeal in your application. We'll review it, and if we find that there's a basis for an appeal, there would be no additional charge for that exam retake. In some instances, we are able, if we don't find that there were any violations, we would potentially be able to grant the candidate an opportunity to retake the exam, but it would be at an additional $65. In the case where a candidate chooses not to appeal, then their only other option would be to submit a new initial application, meaning they would go through the entire assessment process again. So they would be responsible for that full application fee of $425. I'm looking to see if there are any more questions that aren't specific to individual circumstances. Nope, I don't see any other questions.
Okay. Well, we're finishing a little early, right? And if you have more questions, you can always contact our customer service, as Raquel mentioned. It is always a pleasure to provide you with these webinars. And we have another webinar at 3 o'clock this afternoon, East Coast time, in Spanish. So, and then we will keep you informed on the next webinars to come. We also have them in our CAN, in the information from CAN, from the Council Alumni Network. Anything else you want to add, Raquel?
No, I don't think so, other than just be on the lookout for our other sessions that we will be offering in the coming months. We always offer them in English and Spanish, and so just be on the lookout, or if you are a member of CAN, you already have access to sign up for those webinars, so be on the lookout for them. Hopefully you can join us.
Yeah, and tell other people too, so that they can join these webinars. So if we don't have any more questions, thank you so much. And we wish you the best in everything you do for young children.
Hello.
I do see one more question.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it was about somebody said they were unable to attend the last webinar. How can they access it? If you are a member of CAN, then you will have access to the media center where the recording will be posted. So if you're not a member of CAN, I strongly encourage you to join CAN. It is a free membership. You will also have access to an abundance of other resources, but that is how you can access the previous webinars that we did offer. So again, through that media center.
Yeah, and here's the
Hello, how can you sign up again?
right here. I
Okay,
just
yeah.
put the information here. You go to councilcan.org and you join, and it's free. And
Yeah.
we have lots of wonderful opportunities there in Cannes.
Yeah, if not, you can also go directly to our main webpage, which is www.cdacouncil.org. And then looking at those menu options at the very top of the page, you would go to our community, and that's where you'll see the CAN link, which will also direct you on how to sign up.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and the best for you always. See you in the, see you in our next webinar. We'll be with you. Goodbye.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.